Aloha, it's Keegan, and well, I can also say merhaba now because that's the Turkish greeting. I'm here in southern Turkey, staying on this permaculture farm called Lucky Spring Farm, and I'm hiding from the wind in this partially constructed super adobe dome home. So these are earth bag walls that are in the process of that's the first coat of plaster. And I'm wanting to make this video and share some inspiration and new perspectives that I gained over the last couple days while I was listening to the People's Reset, which is a gathering that happened in England, in the town of Bath, but was also broadcast online, and I was tuning in. And I've been tuning into this gathering that's been happening yearly for the last 5 years, and this is the first time it's been called the People's Reset. Before that, it was called the Greater Reset, in one-upment to the Great Reset, which is the idea, composed and put forth by the World Economic Forum that by 2030 we'll have one world government that is basically controlling the world population very tightly. And that is a ridiculous idea to me, and if you listen to the People's Reset, you would see why. You can do that. It's free and it's online on their Odyssey channel, and I can put a link in the description of the video. But I'm going to share some highlights of things that were new to me, or that particularly resonated. So the reason it's greater, or the reason it's the People's Reset, is because it's about individual people standing up for freedom and resetting our global social systems in such a way that serve us as the people, and really that serve all of life. They talk about permaculture at this event, and that's, to me, I define that as permanent culture, something that is gonna last. So yeah, you can call it sustainable, and that's gonna lead to a good life for our future generations. And that's near and dear to my heart. I think that individual freedom is something that is essential element in that, and there's a lot of other people who agree with me, and they're all starting to coalesce, and within our divine connectedness, there's a lot of things that we do in synergy with all life, that we do out of we do them unconsciously, but we're growing more conscious of that, of our connectedness, and that gives us more power, actually. And the other themes that are involved with that conference include economic alternative systems. So they have a term that's called agorism, and that actually comes from a Greek word, which is agora, that means market. And it's funny how we're just kind of going back to basic concepts. Like, we still are so lost in this system that is the financial slave matrix, basically. But we have a foundation in our ancient history of direct exchange between people, and we knew how to do this. Something that I'm going to talk more deeply about in a minute. But I mean, the whole conference fits within the context of permaculture to me, because it's going towards it's a cultural phenomenon that people would gather like this towards creating a world that works for the people, that allows us to preserve our freedom. And actually, the key to that, as I've talked about before, and you'll see me keep talking about, is our connectedness and really being in touch with the earth and the natural world and with one another. I think that, not only the key to our health is good communication, but also the key to our freedom. And they have permaculture as one of the themes, but I think also the gathering is one of the themes in permaculture. Or having gatherings like this. But other themes that they have are technology, how we can use it to serve us rather than us being the tools of the tools, right? We want to use tools, not be tools. And the first theme, actually, which I didn't mention, is health and conscious growth, self-discovery, and it's very important. And they also talk about economic alternative systems that are being developed. Like there was something called Darknet. That was one example that was discussed during this People's Reset. But basically, agorism is this concept that we can just have a free economic exchange between us as people and not have to rely on a governmental institution to do that. So it's like kind of like a basic concept. For me, it seems like duh. And that's, my permaculture teacher, Stephen Brooks, would always have us as students say duh when we're like learning about permaculture. It's like the obvious thing that needs to be done that just makes perfect sense, that like of course we would exchange directly between each other. Like that was, now this concept of agorism is like creating something that's alternative, whereas like in ancient Greece the agora just meant the market. And it's interesting, I'm reading this book that's called Debt, the First 5,000 Years by David Graeber, and he talks about what we had in our societies before coins came about, because the first coins were minted by governmental institutions to provide for a military. That like coins became necessary to pay soldiers, or that's the solution that they came up with to allow soldiers to have what they need, and to organize that. But before that, it wasn't just like Adam Smith says in his work on economics. He said that like there was just like it's this like fanciful idea about bartering, how people were like trading like fish for like vegetables, and it wasn't so like rudimentary. There's a lot of like evidence that he goes into in the book about how we had systems of credit in ancient societies before any coins or money. Like it was like a ledger that people had to keep track and keep tally of what they owed each other. And interesting, another aspect, Neil Oliver was the guy who actually closed up the whole People's Reset event, and he talked about this history of they're called rye, or I guess they're also called Fey stones, which is an interesting name. They're like in Micronesia, in the Yap Islands, they have these big stone like donuts basically, and they changed hands in significant events, like if like one faction of the people, one tribe, one clan had a marriage with between their son and the daughter of another clan, then they might have one of these stones change hands. And it wasn't that they would pick it up and take it with them. It was just a giant stone. They would just all know, and they didn't keep a written history of it, but it was oral tradition that kept track. The people kept track in their collective memory of who owned which stone among all the different like tribes in this people. So I never heard about this before, but Neil Oliver, he introduced it as a concept of like an ancient distributed ledger, which is something that we now have as the blockchain technology. But I mean, the ledger was just in the oral tradition. But in many ancient societies, like David Graeber talks about in his book, we had systems of credit that were just like, it was like also like a distributed ledger, so we're going back to classical, the things that just simply made sense for us to do, to make life work, and away from this like parasitic system of the government taking the people's energy, having tax, and like requiring us to exchange in their currency, and then always like taking their cut and then putting it towards things that we don't want to see in the world war, mainly, and democide. And so, yeah, and into that. But I wanted to actually talk about some of the philosophical concepts that were also presented by another speaker, whose name was Nigel Howitt, at the People's Reset. He apparently has a podcast called Living Outside the Matrix, which I discovered now, so I'm excited about that. And he was talking about freedom, which he defined as the ability to act on one's own judgment. And he basically said something that's similar to, well, I see how it connects anyway to what I was sharing in a video I made a couple days ago of a perspective that I learned in Damanhur, which is that basically freedom comes from self-discipline. That if we aren't the force of discipline or the source of discipline in our own lives, we will have discipline coming to us from another source. And that's, it's pretty simple. I think it's an elegant truth. Take it or leave it. But how it, this is what Neil was saying, or sorry, this is what Nigel was saying. All these new people for me. Is he was drawing a contrast between altruism and egoism. So, altruism, like concern with the welfare of others. That's the definition that I learned in school. And egoism being concerned with yourself, right? And he was talking about something that he called rational egoism, and it's also just a common sense thing that we cannot be first concerned with the welfare of others if we don't first take care of ourselves. Basically, if we only think of serving others, we have our own needs that we have to take care of first, right? In order to be able to serve others. And so he was just drawing our attention to that. He called it the basis of personal sovereignty. So because we are all individual, we have individual needs. A lot of them are very similar, true, but we are, we're deeply unique, each one of us, and also we have different desires and choices that we like to make. And so without this motivation to serve our self-interest, we wouldn't be able to go and make these decisions that are going to bring us ultimately our health and towards our greater our fulfillment. Like, he defined rational egoism as prioritizing being your best self. And so I thought that was pretty interesting, like throwing it in a new light, because we always you think of egoism as something that's also negative. The other part of that is, so he was saying egoism as opposed to altruism is much like individualism as opposed to collectivism. And like, all right, they say like the Great Reset, is based on a collectivist philosophy. This ethos that's going towards one world government where we give up our personal freedom, for the greater good, and basically surrender to be a cog in a machine that is serving a ruling elite. Basically, that's how collectivism manifests, like as we've seen from the communist revolution. It wasn't actually a true communist society, right? That came from the communist revolutions. It was a ruling elite controlling the resources and the minds of their population, and saying that you need to surrender your personal will and don't be so egotistical. Do it for the greater good. It's the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. But we know that that's not the way it's meant to be.